Welcome to the NGIT website and math podcast. My name is Vanessa, and today I'll be covering the proof of the quadratic formula. Most people take the time to memorize the quadratic formula in order to solve quadratic functions for their roots. But a lot of people don't know is, how do you come to the quadratic formula? No one really knows, and people think that it's really some complicated proof using shapes and lots of equations, and it's really not. It's actually quite straightforward. It's basically taking your standard form of the quadratic equation and completing the square in variable form, of course. So this tutorial is just going to go over the steps that it takes to go from a regular standard quadratic equation and how to derive the quadratic formula. So let's take the standard form of the quadratic equation, which we know is ax squared plus bx plus c. And naturally, when we're looking for the quadratic formula, it's when we want to solve for when the equation is set equal to 0, and we want to solve for the roots. So we need to set it equal to 0. And how to get to the quadratic formula is just first simply completing the square. And if you remember how to complete the square, is that the highest variable, the x squared, needs to have a coefficient of 1. So we're going to assume that the a, because it can be any number, is not equal to 1. And we're going to divide the entire equation by a. So we're going to divide the left side by a and the right side by a. So the left side comes out to be x squared plus b over a x plus c over a, and then 0 minus 0 over a is just still 0. Okay. Then next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our constant coefficient, which is the c over a, and we're going to move it to the other side of the equal sign. So we're just going to subtract c over a on both sides. So then this leaves us with x squared plus b over a x equal to negative c over a. Correct? Okay, so what I like to do when I complete the square is that when I get to this point, I like to rewrite the equation, but with the proper gaps for the numbers that we're going to put in. So let me just rewrite this here. It's x squared plus b over ax, and of course you leave a gap here, and then you put in the equal sign, and then you leave another gap, and then minus c over a. Okay, then remember what we do next for completing the squares. We take the coefficient of the middle term, of the second term, b over a, which in this case is b over a. We're going to divide by 2 and square it. Now since this is with numbers, I'll do it on the side as a so that you can follow along. So we have b over a divided by 2, which can be rewritten as b over 2a, correct? And then we're going to square it. So when you square it, you get b squared over 4a squared. And then of course when you write it on one side, you have to write it on the other side. So we're going to do the same thing. b squared over 4a squared. Okay, so then you take the left side of the equation and we're going to condense it to a perfect square. Now the shortcut to do that is, because you know this is going to be squared, is you take the first term and you take the square root, because it should be a perfect square. So square root of x squared is x. The square root of the third term, which is square root of b squared over 4a squared, which is just b over 2a. And then you just take whatever the sign is of the middle term. In this case, the middle term is positive, so it's positive. Alright. And then simply we're going to rewrite the right side as b squared over 4a squared minus c over a. Okay? Now the next thing is you remember the quadratic formula is always the variable equal to the rest of the equation. So the next step is just simply to solve for x. So we'll go through that step by step. Now because where we have the x on the left side of the equation, it's all squared. The first thing we need to do is get rid of the squared, correct? So how do you get rid of a square? You take the square root. So we're going to take the square root of here, and take the square root of here. And so on the left side, it just leaves us with x plus b over 2a. And of course, on the right side, these are all numbers and there's no variables there, so don't forget it's plus or minus. We can take the square root. B squared over 4a squared minus c over a. Okay? So now we are going to do simply some rearranging now of the right side. Okay? First thing we want to do is combine it into one fraction, because we have two fractions underneath the radical. So let me just write this. Okay, on the denominator we have 4a squared and an a. So naturally, what is the common denominator? It would just be 4a squared. Okay, and then the first term would be b squared, because we have everything for the denominator. And in the second portion, we just have the a. So it would be c times, we have 1a, so what we have left to compensate is another 4a. Okay, starting to look familiar, right? So, and then we're going to rewrite the left side. Okay, so, what's next? Alright, the next thing is, first I'm just going to rewrite what I had on the previous slide, which is x plus b over a, 2a is equal to plus or minus. And don't forget, the last step, all we did was combine everything into one fraction. B squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. Okay, so now we can't take the square root of anything on the top because we have nothing in common to factor out or pull out, and because this is a subtraction, we can't just take the square root of each term individually. However, in the denominator we do have 4a squared, which can be taken the square root of. So we're going to do that. So on the right side, on the denominator, you have, what's the square root of 4a squared? Is going to be 2a. And then in the numerator, you still have b squared minus 4ac. And then I'm just going to rewrite the left side. Okay. So then the second, we're almost there. Next part is we need to get x by itself on the left, so we're going to subtract b over 2a on both sides. So if we do that, what do we get? We get x is equal to plus or minus b over 2a plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. It's really starting to look familiar now, huh? Now the last thing we want to do is because naturally we have two of the same denominators in the fractions. We have 2a here and a 2a over there. The last step is just we want to combine everything into one simple fraction, as you can remember that the quadratic formula has. So then after we combine it, our final answer is going to be x is equal to plus or minus and the whole thing is under 2a. And then just bring the numerator together. Minus b plus or, oops, sorry, the plus or minus should be over here. Minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac. And there is the quadratic formula. So as you can see, the quadratic formula is derived from a simple completing the square concept, which makes a lot of sense because completing the square is another form of just rewriting the quadratic equation from its standard form. And from here, you can use quadratic formula to find roots, factor, and several other things. So thank you for visiting the NGIT website. If you need any further assistance, please stop by the CAPE, or the Center for Academic and Professional Enrichment, in Kufrian Hall, room 200. Good luck in your studies.